Hello Eurates and welcome back to mathematics. In today's lesson we're continuing with our topic of fractions, decimals and percentages, and we're going to be looking at actually applying a few percentages. So what we want to be able to do by the end of today's lesson is to write a quantity as a percentage of another and find a percentage of a quantity. So in the last lesson we started talking about percentages, and so we actually went through how to convert from a fraction to a percentage and back, and also the same thing with decimals. What we're doing in this lesson actually applying some of those skills and using percentages in a few different contexts. So let's start off by looking at how to write a quantity as a percentage of another. So here, when we write a percentage of a quantity of another, the example I like to think of what this skill actually involves is your marks from an exam. So let's say we sat an exam and you got 25 out of 40 marks. You got 25 out of 40. That's your marks out of the exam. But what we want to do is we actually want to be able to write this as a percentage. What percentage of those marks did you get? And so here, if I was to do that, I would go, okay, I want to convert this fraction into a percentage, and we've actually done that. And so for this one, this would, I think, get you, let me think about this for a second, that should give you 62.5%. Okay, and so what we want to be able to do is actually go through this step, writing a quantity as a percentage of another. And so we're writing our quantity, so we have 25 marks out of a total possible of 40, and we want to write that as 62.5%. So what this involves is actually knowing how many marks we got correct. So here, or the part that we have out of the whole, figuring out the whole, and then writing that as percentage. So here's the steps that we want to follow. Steps here. Step 0. Now here I have a step 0, which is a step that you need to do if and before you actually do the following steps. So here, step 0, check that both quantities are in the same unit. If not, convert. So if your two units that you're comparing are not in the same unit, what you want to do is you want to convert your two units. And usually I have a note here. I say usually to the smaller unit. We want to convert it to the smaller unit. So what we want to do is convert our units first. The second part is then we write it as a fraction. So just like I did it up above, we write the fraction with the part in the numerator. So part in the numerator and the whole in the denominator. So for that example, when I had 25 out of 40 for my exam, I wrote at the top of my fraction, I had 25 marks. That's my part. So that's how many marks I got correct. And at the bottom, I wrote 40. That was how many marks there were in total in the exam. So in the top, we're putting how many parts we have. And in the bottom, we're putting the whole amount that we're comparing that with. And the final part, all we need to do is convert the fraction to a percentage. And we did this last lesson when we were converting from fractions to percentages. And what we did was we multiplied by 100. So here, let's have a go at a couple of examples of this. So the following ones. Express each of the following as a percentage. So here, we've got two examples of that. The first one is 34 out of 40 as a percentage. So what we want to do, firstly, we want to check that they have the same unit. For these examples, we don't have any units, so we're all good. We don't need to actually do this step 0. Step 1, what we want to do is write it as a fraction. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write 34 out of 40 as a fraction. And then from there, I'm going to convert it to a percentage. And so what we did from last lesson was we multiplied that by 100%. So we multiplied it by 100%. And so here we just need to simplify. I'm just going to go, okay, there's 2 lots of 20 that go into 40 and 5 lots of 20 that go into 100. So I'm simplifying here. And I also notice that an additional step, 2 can go into 34 17 times. And all I need to do now is just multiply those two numbers, 17 times 15. 17 times 5, which gives you 85%. So here, what we want to do, write our two quantities as a percentage. So your part in the top, your whole at the bottom, and then you convert that fraction into a percentage. Okay, let's have a go at the next example. Part B, 13 out of 30. Once again, same thing. I'm going to write my part. So here it's 13 out of 30. So I'm going to have 13 over 30. Then from there, we're just going to multiply that by 100% to convert it to a percentage. And here I'm just going to go, okay, I want to simplify. I want to see if I can cancel out anything. So here, 30 and 100 have a common factor of 10. 10 times, 10 goes into 100 10 times, and 10 goes into 33 times. And so now that I've got that, I'm just going to multiply the two numbers at the top 130 over 3%. And the additional thing that I said last lesson was that we don't want to write fractions as in our percentages. So I'm just going to figure out what this is as a decimal. So I'm going to go 130 over 3. And so that gives me 43.333. So that's a recurring decimal. I can just write this as 43.3 recurring percent. So here, that's what we do when we are trying to write a quantity as a percentage. So here we're comparing two quantities together, and we just want to write it as a percentage. Write the number, write it as a fraction first. So we write the part at the top and the whole at the bottom. Then we're converting that fraction to a percentage. So we just multiply that number by 100%, and then we write that number at the end. Okay. So that was the first couple of examples. Now the second lot of examples, we need to actually convert the units because the units are not the same. We can only do this particular operation, particular operation if we have the same units in both the top and bottom of my fraction. So here with these examples, we're going to notice that with different units, we need to actually convert the units first. So if you have a look here, I've got 60 cents as a percentage of 5. Oh, so here, this is the question. Express the following. We want to express 60 cents as a percentage of $5. Now, notice here, we've got 60 cents and we've got $5. They are not the same unit. So what we want to do in step 0, we want to actually convert them to the same unit. The way I do this is I usually pick the bigger one and convert it to the units in the smaller one. Now, dollars are bigger than cents, and so I'm going to convert $5 to become cents. Now, if you remember, $1 has 100 cents. And so $5 is just going to be 5 lots of 100 cents. So here, this is just going to be equal to 500 cents. And so now that I've done that, notice here, 500 cents, that's in the same units as 60 cents. And we can just do the exact same steps that we did before. 60 cents as a percentage of 500 cents. So I'm going to write here 60 over 500. That's my writing as a fraction. Then we're going to multiply that by 100% to convert it to a percentage. So let's go through the steps. So what we're going to do, we're going to try and simplify. 100 and 500 have a common factor of 100. So 100 goes into 100 one time and goes into 500 5 times. And actually in my fraction here, I can simplify it a little bit more. I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to simplify 5 and 60. 5 goes into 60 12 times. So I'm just going to simplify that. And all I need to do is just multiply those numbers together. So here, this becomes 12%. Now, if you're not sure how to do the simplifying step, I should have said it before, but you can just chuck this all into a calculator and it makes it a lot easier for yourself. So here, if you're putting this in the calculator, 60 over 500 times by 100 gives you 12. So we just put 12% there. Okay, let's go through the next one. So here for these ones, what we need to do first before we do any of the other steps is we need to make sure that we convert the units to be the same. So here, this next one, I want to write 2 kilometers as a percentage of 800 meters. Okay, now here, once again, we've got 2 different types of units. We've got kilometers and meters. And so we can't actually do this writing as a quantity quite yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to convert them to the same unit. What I suggest is picking the bigger unit and converting it to the smaller unit. Kilometers are bigger than meters. And so I'm going to convert my 2 kilometers into meters. Okay, so 2 kilometers. Now 2 kilometers and meters, 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. And so, so what I'm going to do is if I have 2 kilometers, that's just 2 sets of 1,000 meters or 2,000 meters. And now that I've done that, once again, I have the same units. They're both in meters now. And I can do that step that we did before. Write it as a fraction, convert it to a percentage. So here, because I'm doing 2 kilometers as a percentage of 800, the part I'm going to have is actually this 2,000. So I'm going to have 2,000 over 800 as my fraction. So I wrote the fraction, then I'm going to times it by 100%. And so here I'm going to just do that, and I'm just going to start simplifying. So once again, I'm going to have a look. My 100 and my 800 here, they have a common factor of 100. So I'm going to go cancel out the 100 from there. So I've got 1 and 8. My 8 and 2,000 actually have a common factor. 8 actually goes into 2,000. It goes into 2,000. Let me just check that. That's 250 times. And so here my final answer is just going to be 250%. So we can actually check this answer once again. As I said, this part you can actually do with your calculator if you're not sure how to do that simplifying step. I can just go 2000 over 800 times by 100 gives you 250. So here I've got 250%. Okay, so that's how we write a quantity as a percentage. What we want to do is, firstly, we want to check that both of them have the same unit. If they don't have the same unit, we want to convert. So we need to remember our conversion of different units. Then the second step is the first step after that is then to go, okay, I'm going to write it as a fraction. In the top of my fraction, I'm going to have my part. At the bottom of my fraction, I'm going to have the whole. What part am I comparing to the whole? And then from there, we convert it to a percentage. Here, we multiply by 100%. Okay, so that's what we do when we are converting, writing quantities as a percentage. So that's the first part of today's lesson. The second part is what we want to actually find a percentage of a quantity. So finding a percentage of a quantity. So here, the example of when this particular steps or this particular skill would be used is if you wanted to find, for example, 10%, if you get told 10% of students are left-handed. Now, in our maths and science in action class, we have 60 students roughly. So if the statistics say that 10% of students are left-handed approximately, how many should we expect in our maths and science in action class? Well, if I want to find 10% of 60 students, that actually just gives me 6 students are left-handed. And so what we want to do is actually, this is when we want to find a percentage of an amount. Yeah, so that's what we are doing for this next part here. So the steps that we need to do when we are doing this. The first step. Now this step is just my personal preference. When I do work with percentages, I don't like having to put in the percentage symbol in my calculator. This step is optional if you are okay with doing that. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment on your calculator. But what I usually do is I convert my percentage to a fraction or a decimal. I usually choose a decimal. Purely because when I do these calculations, it's quite easy to put in a decimal into your calculator. Then what we want to do is then we want to multiply. The step that we want to do in particular when we're finding a percentage of a quantity is to multiply. We multiply our percentage that we found, our percentage, so that fraction or decimal, if we've converted it, with the quantity. So I'm going to show you how to do this with both of these examples. I'm going to do it by a decimal, but I'm also going to show you how to do this in your calculator if you want to use the percent symbol. So here, finding a percentage of a quantity. First one, we want to find 25% of 128. I'm just going to show you the steps I would normally do. Now here, if I want to find 25% of 128, I've got 25%. That's just equal to, as a decimal, we move the decimal point to the left, 1, 2. And so here, 0.25. That is what 25% is as a decimal. So if I want to find 25% of 128, I just go 128 times 0.25. And so I can put this in my calculator, 128 times 0.25, and that gives me 32. So that gives me 32. So that's how I would normally do these types of questions. Now, you can actually do this without having to convert your percentage to a decimal. So what you can actually do here is actually just go 128 times 25%. And you can chuck this in your calculator. So here I would go 128 times 25, and I'm going to find the percent symbol. The percent symbol is right above my left bracket here, so I have to press shift left bracket, and there, 32. So this is, in particular for the people with scientific calculators, this might be a more easy way to do this particular type of question for you as well. Okay. The other question example that we have here. So we want to find 155% of 60. So I'm going to do the same steps I did before. So 155%. Now as a decimal, I'm just going to move the left, the decimal place 2 to the left. So here the decimal place was originally after the 5. So I'm going to move it 2 to the left and it becomes 1.55. Then from here, I'm just going to multiply my 60 by 1.55. So I'm going to go 60 times 1.55. I'm going to put that in my calculator, 60 times 1.55, and I get 93. So that is 93. And once again, I'm just going to show you how to do this if you don't want to use, convert it to a decimal. So here we can just go 60 times 155% in your calculator. I'm just going to put that 155% in. So 60 times 155%. and get 93 as well. So that's how we can actually answer these questions here. We can, when we are trying to find a percentage of a quantity, what we want to do is we want to multiply. That's the main operation that we're doing here. So we're multiplying. The step before that I added is up to you if you want to do it. I usually do it because I find it a lot easier to type this in your calculator than having to find the percent symbol. Usually what you can do is for the first step, you can convert your percentage to a fraction or a decimal and then multiply that number with your original amount. So that's it for today's lesson. Let's quickly recap what we've actually looked at in today's lesson. In today's lesson, we started applying our percentages. So what we wanted to, there was two things that we want to do. Firstly, we want to write a quantity as a percentage of another. So this is when we're comparing two amounts to each other. And what we want to do for this is we want to write our, make sure that our quantities have the same unit, write it as a fraction, and then convert that fraction to a percentage. So that was the first part of today's lesson. The second part was when we wanted to find a percentage of a quantity. This is where we wanted to see what 10% of an amount was, for example. And what we have to do here is, optionally, you can convert your percentage to a decimal or fraction. That's my personal choice that I like to use. And then from there, we multiply that decimal or fraction with our quantity. You could also do this by putting the percent symbol in, but that would mean that you need to use your scientific calculator for that as well. So that's it for today's lesson. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message on Google Classroom or via email. I'm more than happy to try and answer your questions. But as always, Year 9, I hope you guys are staying safe wherever you are, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!